At the Halloween party, Greg had to face what was hidden behind the masks of his loved ones. A harmless flirtation develops into something more that undermines trust and forces him to reconsider everything he knew about his wife and friends. One night will change his life forever. By the time my wife and I showed up, the Halloween party was already in full swing. I couldn't take my eyes off her toned figure, perfectly highlighted by her skin-tight, jet-black Catwoman costume, whip included. Honestly, even Michelle Pfeiffer couldn't have pulled off Catwoman as seductively. Despite having 2 kids, who were with my parents for the weekend, Alicia looked stunning. I must admit, I sometimes overlook just how attractive she truly is. I was dressed as a pirate. Original, intimacy, imaginative? Definitely not. But it was easy. Alicia gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and went off to mingle with the other guests. I headed toward the drinks, where some of my friends were engaged in a loud and heated debate. As I got closer, I realized why tensions were so high. It was one of those discussions that challenge your intellect and make you think outside the box. Who would win in a fight? The Hulk or Superman? I shook my head at the pointlessness of such a debate. You'd think a room full of grown, intelligent men could find less asinine topics to discuss. Everyone knows the last son of Krypton is the obvious choice. Why was this even a discussion? Anyway, I decided to join this monumental debate by offering my expert opinion, scientifically gathered through extensive research as a kid. This involved spending hours poring over Marvel and DC comics with wide-eyed fascination. Confident that my knowledge was superior to anyone else's, I was sure my input would settle the matter once and for all. Surprisingly, the others didn't see my arguments as definitive. I only managed to make the conversation louder. But that's what happens when you mix adult, which doesn't necessarily mean mature, men with beer. You get a bunch of adolescents who burp, fart, and sometimes wrestle. You'd think that a room full of scantily clad nurses, catwomen, and various animals, basically tight leotards and animal ears, would shift our attention to more primal thoughts. Eventually, we all agreed to disagree and set aside the discussion, even though I knew I was right. There was too much beer and fun to be enjoyed. I decided to stay relatively sober since I was aware that Alicia wouldn't be driving us home. We had just arrived, and I noticed she was already having a fantastic time. She was sitting on the couch next to her best friend, Susie. Susie was also dressed as Catwoman, but she chose the Halle Berry version. And yes, she wore her costume just as well as Alicia did. Alicia and Susie have been inseparable since junior high. Growing up, they lived on the same block. They're so similar that the only way they can coexist is either as best friends or fierce rivals. They talked alike, dressed alike, did most of the same things, and even looked alike. Both sets of parents are mom and dad to them. The running joke during their teenage years was that one of their moms had twins and gave the extra baby to the other family. The only mystery was figuring out who the real mother was. They both hated that joke, by the way. Susie married a guy named Dominic. They got married 2 years before Alicia and I did. At this point, we'd been married for 6 years. You might think that because the 2 girls were so similar, they would marry the same type of guy. Wrong. Susie's husband is the complete opposite of me. I'm a clean-cut person who doesn't do much physical labor at work. Dominic spends his days working with his hands. As the district manager overseeing 6 local restaurants owned by my company, I typically dress in business casual attire. Definitely not the suit and tie type. For context, I'm not the nerdy or geeky type either. I played baseball in high school and picked up boxing in college. It was more of a hobby than a career, but it kept me in shape. After getting married and settling into family life, my gym visits decreased. Still, I've managed to stay in decent shape. Dominic, on the other hand, works at a local factory. I'm not exactly sure of his role, but it involves lifting heavy items for hours on end. Plus, he practically lives at the gym. Imagine someone like Khal Drogo from Game of Thrones. That's Dominic. As for me, I'm more of a Don Draper from Mad Men. I didn't dislike Dominic, but we weren't close friends either. He was just Susie's husband to me, and Susie happened to be my wife's best friend, so I'd see him at gatherings now and then. That night he arrived dressed as Tarzan, despite it being around 50 degrees outside. It felt a bit over the top, but that's Dominic. He mingled with the guests and, as usual, was friendly, some might say flirtatious, with the women. His light-hearted jokes had them laughing, and he certainly didn't hold back with his charm. Even Alicia, my wife, seemed amused, and that irked me a little. You'd think Susie might find his behavior a bit much, but she just laughed along with everyone else. She'd occasionally say, "Dominic, knock it off," with a smile, but it was all in good fun. Dominic was in high spirits that night, more than usual. He'd had a bit to drink, which seemed to make him more animated. He was outgoing, chatting with everyone, and, admittedly, a bit touchy. I noticed a few husbands watching, and I'll admit, I kept an eye out whenever he was near Alicia. It's just what you do. Alicia must have sensed my unease, because she walked over to me. "Enjoying yourself, Greg?" she asked above the music. I nodded and sipped my beer. As she stood next to me, I watched her move to the beat. I noticed her gaze drifting toward Tarzan. Without realizing it, she gave his physique a silent appraisal. I sensed something I wished I hadn't. Desire. I admit it. I felt jealous. Who in their right mind dresses like Tarzan when it's cold out? Alicia snapped out of her trance and looked at me. "You know Dominic, sweetheart. He always needs to be the center of attention." I scoffed and took another sip of my beer, which suddenly tasted flat. Alicia noticed my change in mood. "Don't tell me you're jealous, honey." "Why would I be jealous of him? I don't have to leave the house half-necked to get attention from women." Alicia laughed it off. "Of course not, honey," she said as her focus shifted back to that show-off. As the evening unfolded, more drinks were poured, leading everyone to become even more outrageous. Eventually, Dominic and his loincloth faded into the background while I spent time with my actual friends. At some point during the night, Dominic began cozying up to Alicia. I didn't notice until I went looking for her after realizing she had been absent for a while. I discovered them together in the kitchen, Alicia and Dominic. They stood close, speaking in hushed tones. The intimacy was too much for my liking, and jealousy surged within me. Dominic noticed me first and stepped back to a more appropriate distance. Sensing the shift in atmosphere, Alicia turned to see me as well. She attempted a warm smile, but it felt forced. "Hey, honey, I was just looking for you," she said hurriedly, a bit too hurriedly. "Really, Alicia? I've been in the same spot all night." Despite trying to hide it, my tone came off accusatory. She visibly flinched. Dominic made a swift, quiet exit, leaving the two of us alone. "Are you upset with me, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice dripping with innocence. "What were you two discussing?" "I find you tucked away here with him, whispering like two teenagers sharing secrets. What's going on?" "Honey, stop it. There's nothing happening between Dominic and me. He was just being his usual flirtatious self. Nothing for you to get worked up about." "Worked up? What exactly is that supposed to mean?" A smirk briefly crossed her face but quickly faded, replaced by a look of empathy and concern. "I'm just a little tipsy, sweetie. Don't mind me." With that, she patted my cheek and walked away. For the rest of the evening, Dominic and Alicia weren't seen together. Believe me, I was watching them closely, like a hawk. In fact, it seemed like they were deliberately avoiding each other. I did catch them exchanging some cryptic glances, but that was it. That was enough. more than enough to set off my instincts. I was starting to feel very uneasy. I needed a break from my watchful role. The beer was catching up with me, and I had to take care of things before it became urgent. So I headed upstairs. As I exited the bathroom, I ran right into Dominic. It felt like he'd followed me up there, as if he had something to say. "Do you have a problem with me, Greg?" He slurred, his words heavy with alcohol. His eyes were intense, like he was trying to intimidate me. "What?" I replied, feeling the tension. The whole night had felt strange, but this moment felt especially surreal. "I asked if you have a problem with me. You're always looking down on me. You with your fancy car and upscale house, always flaunting your money. Do you think you're better than me?" I had no idea where this was coming from. "You're drunk, Dominic. Go home before you say something you'll regret," I said, pushing past him. "Say something like what? Like how enjoyable it is to spend time with your lovely wife." Now he had my full attention. I turned back and stepped up to him until we were inches apart. "Careful, buddy. Don't let these button-up shirts fool you. I can make this unpleasant for you. Leave my wife out of whatever strange ideas you have." He smirked at me. "Strange ideas? Call them what you like. I have memories." He emphasized the last word, effectively ending the conversation. His words hit me hard. "You're full of it," I replied, though I wasn't as confident as I'd been before this party. "Am I lying?" he sneered. The implication was clear, and it left me with more questions than answers. Those were his final words. The only other sounds were the sickening thud of bone against bone as a fist connected squarely with a jaw, followed by the crash of 195 pounds breaking through drywall. I charged down the stairs like an enraged bull. At the bottom, I found Alicia rushing toward me. "Greg, what?" Her question died on her lips. One look at me, and she knew that I knew. Her wide, tear-filled eyes confirmed everything Dominic had revealed. "Oh my God, someone call 911. Dominic is out cold. I can't wake him up," a voice shouted from upstairs. I didn't recognize who it was. Didn't care. I just stood there staring at Alicia as if she were a stranger. Maybe she always had been. People began rushing upstairs to see what was happening. I remained where I was, staring at Alicia, searching for the wife I thought I knew. Honestly, at that moment, I didn't care whether Dominic was dead or alive. "What the hell did you do to my husband?" came a shriek from behind me, followed by small fists pounding the back of my head. I ducked away from Susie, who was frantically swinging at me. Someone grabbed her and pulled her back. "Greg, what's going on?" my friend Richard asked. He was hosting the party. The wall now had a Dominic-sized hole in it. I ignored him completely and turned to Susie. "Did you know your husband was sleeping with Alicia?" Susie instantly calmed down and stopped trying to attack me. She looked at me as if this explained everything. But she didn't get angry. She didn't call me a liar. Most importantly, she didn't look at Alicia. She just gazed at me as if she understood. And now, so did I. A gentle hand rested on my shoulder. "Greg, we need to talk, but not here." I spun around and gave Alicia the iciest glare I could manage. In that moment, an unprecedented fury surged within me, blinding, searing rage. It was so intense that tears began streaming down my face. But I wasn't truly crying. It was as if the tears were a safety valve to prevent me from exploding. "He's awake!" someone shouted from upstairs. Susie left us and rushed up to tend to her fallen jungle boy. My anger began to subside. The harsh reality of the situation suddenly hit me. What if I had accidentally killed Dominic? One moment of rage could have condemned me to a lifetime of consequences. I might already be facing assault charges. The career I had worked so hard to build could be ruined because I lost control over a drunken fool. a drunken fool who slept with my wife. "Greg, please, honey. Let's leave. We need to talk," Alicia pleaded. "We? No, Alicia. You are going home with your boyfriend and his wife. I'm leaving." I brushed past her and headed for the front door. Desperate, Alicia ran after me and grabbed my arm. "Greg, you're not leaving me here. We are going home, and we are going to talk. Do you hear me, damn it? You're not sidelining me anymore." Her face was streaked with tears. She was a mix of anger and profound sadness, if that makes any sense. I had no idea what she had to be mad about. "I can't deal with you, Alicia. Do not come home. I might already be going to jail for assault. I don't want to add domestic violence to that." "Forget you, Greg. Forget you. You want to hit me? Go ahead, coward. At least then you wouldn't be ignoring me. Heck, it would be the first time you've touched me in weeks." She jabbed her finger into my chest as she spoke. Her anger was escalating rapidly, and I couldn't understand why. She was the one who had been unfaithful. I was the only one with a right to be angry. "That's your justification? Because I don't come home and dote on you every single night? That's your excuse? That's your lousy reason for sleeping with that jerk?" She didn't reply with words. Her defiant stare said it all. "For your information, Alicia, I work for a living. I don't have a spouse to pay my bills. Maybe if you got a job, you'd know what it feels like to come home exhausted." I snapped at her. It was then I noticed we had an audience. And believe me, they were captivated. The only thing missing was a bucket of popcorn in their hands. Alicia looked at me with a scornful expression. Poor Greg. He seems too tired to spend any meaningful time with his own wife, yet somehow has the energy to sit alone in front of his computer every single night. Maybe if he paid more attention to the real world and to the people around him, his wife wouldn't feel so neglected, having no one to turn to except her best friend. By now, Alicia was nearly shouting. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides, and her tear-streaked face showed the depth of her frustration and hurt. That was the breaking point for me. I had never felt so humiliated. I wanted to respond, but no words came out. Around us, friends and neighbors stared, their expressions reflecting a mix of shock, sympathy, and perhaps even discomfort at witnessing such a painful moment. I turned and walked away, Alicia's words echoing behind me, until I reached my car and drove off into the night. "Mr. Kirkson, there's a call on line 1. "Who is it, Betty?" Mr. Ford returning your call, sir." "Greg?" Greg was reaching out to me. I'd been trying to contact him ever since the debacle at my Halloween party. So far, he, his wife, and the other 2 involved had gone completely off the radar. No one had heard a word from them. Naturally, questions were swirling. So many questions. I mean, how could there not be? The meltdown was so public and humiliating, so brutal. It had all the elements you'd expect in top-tier drama: intimacy, violence, betrayal, and an epic showdown between David and Goliath. Except this time, Goliath had a glass jaw, wrote a drunken check that was far too costly, and David cashed it, with interest. "Put him through, Betty." Sir, he sounds a bit upset." Well, obviously. His wife did publicly emasculate him. If he wasn't upset, I'd be concerned. "Thank you, Betty. I'll handle it." I waited for the click that signaled I was connected with Greg. "Greg? Hey, man, I've been trying to reach you since—" I hesitated to finish the sentence. "Since I found out my wife slept with that idiot. Yeah, I've had a lot to think about." I could hear the anger simmering beneath his calm tone. Even over the phone, his emotions were palpable. "So, do you want to talk?" He scoffed on the other end, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Why do you want to talk to me, Richard?" "Huh, buddy? So you can post it online? Does your gripping story need a sequel? Do the curious masses want to know what happened next to the guy who couldn't keep his wife satisfied? Can't your loyal readers wait to find out how my messed-up life unfolds?" Great. So he read the story. Now he's not only furious with his unfaithful wife, her deceitful best friend, and her brutish lover, but with me too. Fantastic. Greg and I go way back to high school. He played baseball, I played football. We connected and formed a friendship that lasted over the years. After graduation, we lost touch for a bit. He went straight to college, and I joined the Air Force. Once he graduated, he returned to our hometown and landed a job as a manager at Olive Garden. Seems like a waste of a college degree, right? I told him as much. But he was tenacious, driven. He was quickly promoted. He excelled in every role he took on. His numbers always looked impressive. He had a sharp business mind. Before long, he was a district manager overseeing multiple restaurants. His paycheck now rivaled mine. Well, almost. After being honorably discharged from the Air Force after 10 years of service, I immediately landed a job with a company that holds military contracts. There's no need to get into the details. Trust me, I wouldn't have to eliminate you if I told you. Yes, cliché. But I'd be violating serious confidentiality protocols and could get into trouble. Not all of us are like Hillary Clinton, you know. Hope you understand. To cut a long story short, I moved back to my hometown, reconnected with Greg, and our friendship picked up as if there had been no interruption. Now my good friend was angry. At me. Not good. Greg. Normally I'd try to lighten the mood with a clever joke or at least ease the tension. Unfortunately for me, it was clear that would be counterproductive this time. I especially liked the ending. He cut me off. All I could do was keep quiet and let him vent. You know, where I tucked my tail between my legs and ran out like a coward. Nice touch. His sarcasm oozed through my earpiece. At that moment, I truly felt like a lousy friend. I had no defense. Greg, where are you? We should talk. You know what's funny, Richard? I've become really popular lately. Much more than before. Seems like everybody wants to talk to me. Must be my charming personality. That's when I noticed his slurred speech. I heard the sound of liquid being tipped back and sloshing against the glass walls of a bottle. Greg, are you drunk? He laughed bitterly. No, Richard. I was drunk an hour ago. I can't even tell you what state I'm in now. Okay. I had been a bad friend. I admit it. Now it was time to fix things. Where are you, Greg? Even as I asked, I was putting on my coat and grabbing my keys. I had a ton of work to do, but that didn't matter at the moment. Screw you, Richard. I'm not telling you where I am. Don't you dare come to this bar looking for me. I'll mess you up if you do. The line went dead. It didn't matter, though. I knew exactly where he was. There were only a few worthwhile bars in our town, and Greg had his favorite, Moe's. Partly because he had a crush on the attractive bartender there. She was one of those women who could flirt with you yet still give off the vibe that she's completely unavailable. Didn't diminish her popularity, though. She was definitely easy on the eyes. When I walked in, my heart nearly broke at the sight of him sitting alone at the bar. He was the only customer there. A quick glance at my watch showed it was just after noon. Karen, the attractive bartender, waved me over as soon as she saw me. Empathy was clear in her eyes as they met mine. "Is this handsome guy yours?" she joked, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I gave a slight nod and subtly gestured for her to give us a moment alone. Greg. That's all I managed before his fist connected with me, making me see stars. No wonder Dominic went down so hard. Before I knew it, I was on the floor, wiping blood from my lip. He stood over me, glaring. Finally, he shook his head and returned to his seat at the bar. I picked myself up and waved at Karen, who had been cleaning tables before Greg struck me. Now she stood staring, eyes wide with shock. She started to approach, but I waved her off, silently assuring her everything was okay. She nodded and went back to her work. "Now that you've gotten that out of your system, can we talk?" I asked as I bravely took the seat next to him. He took another sip of his beer and shook his head. Off the record? He asked sarcastically. I chuckled to myself. At least he still had his wit. That was a good sign, I suppose. Where are you staying? At my parents' place, he said with disdain. Getting along with your mom? You've met my mom, right? Yeah. I remember her patting me down to make sure I didn't bring any prohibited substances into her house. He laughed and took another sip. Good thing I was the one holding the weed. He smiled, a wistful smile, but a smile nonetheless. We shared a laugh. Greg took another sip and then looked me in the eyes. For crying out loud, Richard. It was humiliating enough to go through that, and then to read about it? Knowing all my friends will realize it was me. Greg, I wrote it just to write. I certainly didn't mean to humiliate you. Besides, no one will know it's you, I said, trying to convince both him and myself. 2 Catwomen, a Tarzan, and a pirate. Not to mention the pirate throwing Tarzan through a wall. How many Halloween parties do you think that happened at? All the good ones. Greg looked like he wanted to hit me again. You think this is funny? Okay, humor definitely wasn't going to work. Sometimes I can't help myself. You're right, Greg. I was a jerk. I'm truly sorry for embarrassing you. Well, I'm not sorry for punching you. I rubbed my jaw and laughed. You hit like a wimp anyway. No wonder you always got beaten when you boxed. That helped ease the tension, and he began to open up even more. I managed to get him out of Moe's and into my car. As we were leaving, Karen gave me a grateful look and hugged me. Take care of him, Richard. He's been through a lot, she said. My jaw was throbbing and starting to swell, but reaching Greg was all that mattered to me. The moment he was buckled into my passenger seat, he passed out, as if he hadn't slept in days. Instead of taking him to his mother's house, I brought him to mine. On the way, I called another friend, John. What's up, Richie Rich? He said cheerfully when he answered. John is one of those guys who still thinks he's in his 20s. Great guy, though very immature. Emphasis on very, since most guys are at least a little immature. He's the one who started the whole Hulk versus Superman debate. He's always the life of the party, though none of the wives really want their husbands hanging out with him. He has a knack for getting his friends to act like adolescent troublemakers. We all love him. John, I need your help. I found Greg at Moe's. I might need assistance getting him into my house and into bed. He's out cold. Damn, I'm glad you found him. I've been looking for him all week. After what that woman did to him, it's a wonder he hasn't done something drastic. John pulled his Mustang in behind my Tahoe in the driveway, and we began the task of lifting 200 pounds of dead weight onto the couch in my finished basement. Not an easy job. We chatted for a bit, and he left after I promised to keep him updated. Since I was home early, I had the quiet house all to myself. Trust me, this was rare. So rare that I found I had nothing to do. I didn't want to leave in case Greg woke up and was confused about where he was. So I grilled a steak on my George Foreman grill, best invention since the microwave, and baked a potato. Then I browsed through my cable sports package to see if there were any good games on, or at least interesting debates about games. I finally settled on a documentary about the rise and fall of Allen Iverson, and enjoyed my gourmet meal. Before long, my wife Nikki walked through the door with our kids in tow. "Honey, what are you doing home so early?" she asked as she kissed me on the cheek. The kids ran upstairs. "I found Greg at Moe's, completely wasted. I brought him here and put him down in the basement." Her expression instantly showed hesitation. "Are you sure that's a good idea? I don't want any drunken antics in front of the kids." "He'll be fine, honey. I'll make sure he behaves." She patted my cheek and I winced. That's when she noticed how swollen it was. "Richard, what the heck? Did he do that?" "I'm okay, sweetheart." "Never mind that, Rich. Get him out of here. Darling, it's all right. The man just found out his wife was cheating on him less than 2 weeks ago. It happened so publicly that anyone would be humiliated. He's angry. Plus, he's been dealing with it alone. I'm his friend. He had a lot of pent-up anger, and I don't mind if he took some of it out on me. Besides, my jaw isn't made of glass. Unlike Tarzan, he really should consider wearing a different costume next year. Nikki couldn't help but laugh at that. Seeing Tarzan get his butt kicked by a pirate was pretty funny. I don't think Jane would have been too impressed by that. Yeah, Tarzan definitely wouldn't have gotten any action after that less-than-manly display. Dominic should spend less time lifting weights and more time practicing his punches. Nikki laughed, or at least learned to dodge. We shared a laugh as she relaxed. One thing I've always adored about Nikki is her personality and sense of humor. It's one of the reasons I can't stay mad at her for too long. I headed downstairs to check on Greg. His resounding snores confirmed he was still alive. His heart was beating, but he was essentially out cold. I slipped a pillow under his head just as he released a fart that could have awakened the dead. The stench might have killed them all over again. "What the fuck, Greg?" I muttered, waving a hand in front of my face. The odor seemed to cling to me. I had to get out of there. Hours later, a figure resembling a zombie, my friend, emerged as if from the depths of hell. His bloodshot eyes hinted at death and decay as he shuffled through my kitchen. Nikki glanced at him and shot me a silent warning that spoke volumes. Keep him in line or he's out. I stood up and walked into the kitchen to greet him. "How are you feeling, buddy?" Like my wife cheated on me, humiliated me in front of all our neighbors, and then ran me over with a truck. "Well, at least your memory's intact. 2 out of 3 isn't bad." He narrowed his eyes. "My memory is fine. I remember your fucking story, too." "You recall punching me in the face for it?" I asked, rubbing my sore jaw. "That part's a bit fuzzy. Might need to do it again to make sure it's done." Despite his words, there was no real threat behind them. I knew he wouldn't actually hit me again. "I've said this before, but I'm really sorry about the story, Greg. I didn't think many people would see where it was published, and I didn't consider how you'd feel if they did. I was wrong. People did read it. I even got a text from a guy who heard about the party from someone else. He then read your story online. Who was this guy? You don't know him. An obnoxious blowhard named Harry. Lives in Virginia." I burst into laughter. "You know Harry in VA? So you've heard of him? Good guy once you get past his attitude. By the way, he took my side and thinks you're an asshole, too." He smiled as he said this. "Yeah, well, I'm sure he thought that before he read the story I wrote about you." Greg nodded and chuckled. I gave him a friendly slap on the back. He didn't seem to mind, so I knew we were good. "Richard, why did you have to make me look like such a wimp? Did I really just tuck tail and run?" "A wimp? Greg, you knocked the guy out with one punch like Mike Tyson. I was afraid you'd bite his ear off. If you'd boxed like that in college, you wouldn't have lost so much. No one thinks you're a wimp." "Fuck you. It was a hobby." "I didn't lose, asshole." He smirked and shook his head. "I did knock his ass out, didn't I?" he added humorously, his voice mixing pride and laughter. "Hell yeah. I bet your candy ass couldn't do that," he said, nudging me playfully. "Nope. It would probably take me 2 punches." He couldn't help but laugh. He laughed despite himself. It was good to see. "Rich, what happened after I left?" I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to be hauled off to jail. "Well, Greg, after you left. October 31st. After the party." Alicia collapsed to the floor, wailing in despair as if facing execution. Loud sobs emanated from her slender frame. Seeing Catwoman defeated and crumpled on the ground was a surreal sight. Nikki rushed over to assist her, helping Alicia to her feet and guiding her to the couch where they sat together. The second Catwoman, Susie, slowly descended the stairs alongside the disgraced Tarzan. He clutched his head while his wife supported him down each step. Upon seeing them, Alicia became enraged. She leaped off the couch and practically flew toward them. "You complete jerk! What did you say to Greg? You've ruined my life, you absolute fool!" Tarzan, who had already been humbled by a pirate earlier, now found himself dodging Catwoman's furious attacks. Susie tried to step between them to defuse the situation. "Alicia, stop it! Please stop!" Susie pleaded as she shielded her husband. Being rescued by a woman from another woman only added to Tarzan's humiliation. Could this man disgrace the jungle hero any further? You just had to say something, didn't you? You couldn't take no for an answer. What's wrong with you? The jungle man observed Alicia's anger quietly. His expression showed remorse. Getting knocked out must have sobered him up. He fully understood that he was the cause of tonight's turmoil. "Alicia, I'm sorry, I was drunk," he admitted. She ceased her attempts to attack him and collapsed to the floor once more. "What am I going to do now, Susie?" "What am I going to do?" she cried. Back to the present, Richard's kitchen. Afterwards, they had to rush Dominic to the emergency room. It turned out he had a concussion. He wanted to file charges, but Susie and Alicia convinced him otherwise. Alicia pleaded with him, knowing that if you were arrested, there was little chance of getting you back. Greg scoffed and shook his head. "There's not much hope for that anyway." I nodded sadly. "So, Greg, what happened to you after you left?" "All we heard was the screech of tires and the roar of your engine. I wanted to follow you, but my Tahoe was blocked in. I was worried you'd get into an accident. You weren't answering any of our calls. Yeah, well, I had to get out of there and think, you know. I couldn't handle that. All of our friends just staring at me, judging me. I needed space." "So you went to your mom's house?" "It must have been pretty bad for you to decide to go back there." "Yeah. Well, sometimes life throws you a curveball. The only way to handle it is to do something you'd never do otherwise." Greg narrating. October 31st, after the party. I was furious. That deceitful woman. How could they all betray me? I sped recklessly through the side streets, leaving the neighborhood behind. I honestly had no idea where I was going. Stop signs, speed limits, traffic lights, none of it mattered. I drove as if I were the only one on the road. What was that sound? I turned my head to look at the passenger seat. It was the custom ringtone that plays when Alicia calls. Her beautiful face lit up my Android screen. She smiled at me, a loving smile frozen in time. I remember taking that picture. We were so happy, so full of affection and adoration. All a lie. I had to fight the urge to toss the device out the window. Her picture on the screen deceived me. If I answered, the voice on the other end would deceive me too. The cheerful ringtone announcing her desire to get in touch with me. Liar. Lies. All lies. Here's the truth. She was with Dominic. She let him into her life, welcomed him in ways that were meant to be sacred, moments that should have been shared only between us. She likely kissed him, a kiss that should have been mine, one filled with a connection she once reserved for me alone. Their closeness, their whispers and the energy between them, all a betrayal of what we had. The images flooded my mind. I couldn't stop picturing him enjoying the attention that was supposed to be mine, as if he had any right to it. My vows, my wife, didn't they mean anything? I was the one by her side through everything, from the tough days to our happiest ones. I was there when she was ill. I was there for every moment she needed me, holding her hand, giving her strength. I was the one who promised to love her through anything. And he? He just showed up, and suddenly it was enough to have her attention. The relentless ringtone kept mocking me with its persistence. I silenced it, finally turning off the phone to escape its torment. Silence. No more reminders. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours. My body moved on its own while my mind shut down, struggling to keep up with the weight of it all. Eventually, I looked up to see my parents' garage in front of me. Somehow I had driven here without realizing it. Back to where I'd started, back to a place that once felt safe. I turned off the engine and stepped inside. Even when you vow never to go back, some places still feel like home, at least for now. Because it was late, or early morning, depending on how you saw it, the living room where I'd grown up was cloaked in darkness. Over the decades, nothing had really changed. The couch, the coffee table, the lamp, every piece of furniture was exactly the same as I remembered, frozen in the exact same spot. I could honestly navigate the place with my eyes closed. Oddly enough, I found comfort in that familiarity. This night had changed everything for me in an instant. I'd always been skeptical when people claimed their whole world shifted in a moment, unless it was due to a tragic event, of course. Tonight made me a believer. Everything I thought I knew about my life was turned upside down during one drunken conversation with a Neanderthal. Being back in the familiar surroundings where I grew up felt stable. After an earthquake that collapses buildings and splits the ground open, what people crave most is for everything to be still. Stability was exactly what I needed at this moment. For now, I was home, safe. "Hello? Who's there?" I heard my mom call out. I pictured her crouched in a corner with a baseball bat, ready to rack up some RBIs, really bad injuries. "It's me, Ma." "Gregory?" "Yeah." The lights flicked on suddenly, overwhelming my vision for a moment. I had to squint to avoid being blinded. "What on earth are you sneaking around in the dark for? Trying to give me a heart attack?" "Nice to see you too, Ma." As my eyes adjusted, I was greeted by the sight of an old lady in flower print pajamas, her hair in rollers. If you're picturing Mama's family, you're right on target. "Why are you here so late? And why are you dressed like an idiot?" Straight to the point. That's my mother. Until that moment, I'd forgotten that I was still wearing most of my pirate costume. By now, I'd lost the hat, the parrot, and the eye patch. So I just looked like, well, an idiot. "Long story, Ma. Look, I'm going to be staying here for a while. The kids will go home tomorrow, but I'll be coming back. I'll explain, but I don't want to discuss it in front of the kids, okay? You'll notice I didn't ask her if I could stay. I just informed her of my intentions. It might seem odd to most people, but not to us. My family isn't what you'd call affectionate. My old man is a straightforward kind of guy. He never says more than necessary and expects the same in return. A hug consisted of a brief chest bump and a pat on the back. "I love you" was a phrase reserved for near-death experiences. He and my mom made the perfect couple because she was exactly the same way. She showed very little affection toward him, or me. How they ever managed to navigate their way to each other's genitals to conceive me is a mystery that's both puzzling and unsettling. I honestly think no one else could have dealt with either of them. They were destined to find each other or face the world alone. "Fine, Gregory. You know where everything is. I'm going back to bed." Her frail figure disappeared around the corner and ascended the stairs before she yelled out, "And lock up!" The following morning I decided to turn on that cursed device and assess the damage. 29 missed calls, 15 from Alicia, a few from Richard, and others from people who were at the party. I didn't return any of the calls. Undoubtedly, they all wanted to question the irresponsible husband about his whereabouts. After a few hours of restless tossing and turning, I was still hurt, still angry, and utterly confused. I admit I was curious about what exactly had happened, but my other emotions overwhelmed me, I also wondered why the police hadn't shown up yet. I didn't know what happened to Dominic after I left. Did he go to the hospital? Did he press charges? Was I about to be arrested? I rolled out of bed and slipped out of the house before my mom woke up. I left a note saying I was going out, and that if Alicia called, she should be told I'd contact her when I was ready. She was free to pick up the kids if she wanted. If not, I'd bring them home later. Thankfully, it was Sunday and I didn't have to go to work. That was good because I needed something liquid and strong. The pain from last night weighed heavily on my chest, and I needed something just as potent to drown it out. So I parked outside my favorite bar and walked in. I stayed at my mother's place for the next couple of weeks. During that time, the only interactions I had with Alicia were when I dropped off the kids and picked up some belongings. Our attempts at conversation were awkward and brief, ending with her walking away in frustration. Just before I left, I overheard her on the phone. I listened closely for a few minutes. If she was talking to that jerk, I was going to lose it. Based on her side of the conversation, it seemed to be Susie. I wasn't sure if that was better or worse. I spent most of my free time between my parents' house and the bar. With my dad away on a business trip, it was just me and my mom. Great. She's not one for deep, meaningful conversations. To her credit, she listened and was fairly supportive, but I don't think she could truly relate. Besides, there was no way I was going to tell her about the adult movies, especially after all her warnings during my younger years about going blind and hairy palms. While I was with my mom, we spoke very little. I gave her a general idea of why I was staying with her. She listened attentively but didn't say much about the situation. She asked me what I planned to do about it. All I could offer was a shrug and an I don't know. "You'll figure it out," she said to encourage me. That was the end of the conversation. It might sound a bit cold when I say it out loud, but surprisingly, it was comforting. I didn't have to retell the events over and over until I was sick of them. She didn't need daily updates on how I was feeling or treat me like a fragile piece of china that needed constant care. No efforts were made to cheer me up. I was free to grieve in my own way, on my own terms. I had exhausted all my sick days and personal leave. I just couldn't face anyone. Even though none of my co-workers had been at the party, we lived in a relatively small town where news spreads quickly. It wasn't just coping with my unfaithful wife. It was how she humiliated me, openly in front of everyone with a mix of disdain and amusement. Poor Greg. He's always so tired, yet somehow he finds time every night to sit in front of his computer. Maybe if he focused more on his family instead of his screen, things would be different. How do you move on from that? Eventually, I had to turn off my phone as it wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages kept coming in, names lighting up, begging for an answer. I ignored them all. Whether it was fate or something else, the situation didn't escalate further. It was interesting to see how my friends reacted. They emailed, texted, and even called, but they didn't come to my parents' house. When people don't know what to say, they often just stay silent. They weren't bad friends. They just didn't know what was happening or how to help, so they did nothing. This was both a curse and a blessing. With no distractions, I dwelled on everything constantly. The only way to stop was to drown out the awful thoughts. So I'd spend time at the bar. Karen, a friend there, became my safe place. The hardest part about staying with my mom was being separated from my kids. Though it was self-imposed, it still hurt. Seeing them meant also seeing Alicia. It was like knowing there was a warm bed waiting, but I'd have to endure hardship to get there. So I drank even more to escape. It wasn't until Karen showed me a story written by a friend that I broke the pattern. Catwomen Caught was the title, a story that bore a striking resemblance to my situation. 2 Catwomen, a pirate, a hero. Jav more, you scoundrel. I pulled out my cell, turned it on, and dialed the number. "Good morning. Mr. Kirkson's office. This is Betty. How may I assist you today? Richard's narration, present day, at Richard's home. So, what's your plan regarding Alicia? Divorce? Separation? Confronting her? Greg gave a small, melancholic laugh and stared at the plate before him. Do I have to make a choice? He joked half-heartedly. I could see the anguish etched on his face, his mind replaying the events of Halloween repeatedly, her words echoing in his thoughts. Greg, I need to ask you something. Feel free to tell me to back off if it's too personal, but about the content she mentioned. What was she referring to? Greg's cheeks turned red as he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. So what if I watch videos for relaxation? Are you saying you don't? He replied defensively. I've seen them too, of course, but Alicia mentioned you watch them instead of spending time with her. Is that accurate? Back off, Richard. That's too personal. All right, buddy. I just want to understand what went wrong between you two. You both always seemed so happy. I never saw any signs. He looked down at his meal, idly moving the food around his plate with his fork. She just doesn't get it, Rich. What doesn't she understand? Greg dropped his fork and rubbed his face with both hands, letting out a long sigh, a mix of sadness and perhaps guilt. I work 10 to 12 hours every day. If I'm lucky, it's only 5 days a week. When I come home, I'm exhausted and stressed. I deal with irate investors, dissatisfied customers, frustrated managers, and other work challenges. If the store's numbers are down or some troublesome customer pretends to find a rat to score a free meal, I have to handle it. He paused, gathering himself to continue. I waited patiently for him to open up. Alicia requires a lot of attention. She loves to feel connected, enjoys spending quality time together. And honestly, when I have the energy, it's wonderful. I know guys who complain that their partners are distant or just want to get things over with. Alicia isn't like that at all. But I don't have the stamina to go through all of that every night, especially after dealing with everything at work. He paused and gazed off into the distance. Rich, sometimes it's just easier when I'm by myself. I hate admitting that. I mean, any man would dream of a partner like Alicia, a caring, passionate woman. I'm lucky to have her, I know that. But he started to get misty-eyed. Unearthing the pain of one's marriage can have that effect. It's hard to recognize the role you've played in your own predicament. I do so much for her, for the girls. I work tirelessly to give them everything I didn't have as a kid. My dad was very frugal. He only bought what was necessary. I want more for my daughters, for my wife, and I love spending time with them. They're my world. But sometimes I just don't feel like doing something for someone else. When I come home after dealing with all the crap I handle, I just want to be me. I don't always want to be dad or husband or boss. I guess I let that slip away a bit. How long has it been since you two were intimate? I mean, before the party. He shook his head. I don't know, Rich, I really don't. I didn't even realize it had been that long. I nodded as a level of understanding hit me. Then I saw anger flash in his eyes. But that doesn't give her the right to do what she did, Richard. I didn't humiliate her in front of everyone. I didn't sleep with another woman. She should have come to me. Why didn't she come to me? I had to take a chance with my next comment. It was important to make my point without making him feel like I was taking her side. Maybe for the same reason you never told her why you were looking at adult content. Communication is hard, especially if you don't realize you need to say something in the first place. How do you tell your spouse that you're unhappy? Simple. You say, I'm unhappy. Touché. Things were getting a bit too deep. These are usually the times when I crack a joke. So I shifted gears. So Greg, about my wall. He looked up at me and saw that I was teasing him. He chuckled and shook his head. Consider us even for the story, you jerk. I thought the punch in the face made us even. Not even close. I had to laugh. This glimpse into the Greg from before Halloween was refreshing, even if it was only for a moment. Fair enough. At that moment, I noticed Nikki standing in the doorway with a peculiar expression on her face. Her eyes signaled that she needed to talk to me immediately. I left Greg to his meal and walked over to her. We've got a problem." "What is it, hun?" She looked at me nervously and pulled me closer to whisper. "Somehow, Alicia found out that Greg is here. She's on her way. Darn John. He probably called her to argue or did something equally foolish, unintentionally revealing Greg's location. You need to stop her at the door, Nikki." Nikki raised her hands and shook her head. "Rich, I'm not getting involved in this mess. Greg needs to handle this. He's been avoiding her for 2 weeks." I felt frustration building toward my wife. His unfaithful wife cheated on him. Did you forget that? No, I haven't forgotten. I have a hole in my wall as a reminder. I glanced over at Greg, who was absent-mindedly playing with the food on his plate. He seemed unaware of the impending confrontation headed his way. "What do you want me to do, Nikki?" Her expression softened as she recognized my desire to help my friend. "He has to face this himself, baby. You can support him as a friend, but he can't keep running from it." She patted my chest and walked away. I turned to prepare Greg for what was coming. "Greg, I heard you guys. You can't whisper worth a darn. She's on her way." He rubbed his chin and grimaced. Then a look of determination crossed his face. "Good," he finally said as he pushed away from the table. He turned to me and met my eyes. "I'm ready to deal with it, Doctor. Phil," he said flatly. Then he got up and exited through my back door. Greg narrating the sunset was stunning. Gentle colors spread across the pale sky, orange, red, and every shade in between. So peaceful, almost calming. "Greg, honey." The peace broke. I didn't respond to the voice signaling the arrival of my wife. I didn't even turn to look at her, keeping my eyes fixed on the masterpiece above. Alicia took my silence as permission to sit down. She wasn't entirely wrong. She settled beside me on Richard's back porch, curling her knees to her chest, looking for comfort. "I've been looking everywhere for you, honey." She couldn't have chosen a worse way to start. "I've been right here all night," I mumbled, repeating the words I used when I discovered her and Dominic talking closely in Richard's kitchen a couple of weeks ago. She looked at me, confused, as if she didn't understand my response. "Greg, we need to talk." I nodded slightly. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see the tension in her body language. I didn't look at her face, but I imagined it carried a sense of remorse. Puffy eyes, flushed cheeks, a sorrowful expression. Her voice sounded that way, at least. "I love you, honey." "Lies," I interrupted. "Greg." "Stop it, Alicia. Just stop. You can't claim to love me after treating me that way. Making our personal issues public? I would never do that to you." "What are you talking about, Greg?" "You did that to me." Her voice rose with anger. "You came down the stairs upset. Then, in front of everyone, you asked Susie if she knew I was seeing her husband. In front of everyone. If you wanted to talk privately, you could have pulled me aside. But no, you put it all out there first." She had a point. I hadn't seen it that way at the time. I'd been too angry. "Okay, Alicia, I'll give you that. But I didn't start this. Your friend approached me, making all sorts of claims in front of others. I was furious, a completely justified reaction. Could I have handled it better? Sure. I took a moment to regain control of my emotions. They threatened to spill over. "But I didn't betray you," I continued. "No one came to you sharing personal details about me or suggesting I was unfaithful. You don't have to wonder if I'm seeing someone else. If it hadn't been for your actions, none of this would have come up in the first place." I looked directly into her eyes, noticing how her anger faded, replaced by remorse and guilt. "I know about Richard," she admitted. I simply shook my head. "But do you really understand, Alicia?" Her eyes reignited with a spark. "You might not have physically been with Richard, but you weren't truly with me either. Do you remember the last time I asked you for closeness? Do you?" I shook my head again. "It was on my birthday. I tried to make it a special night. I put on my best outfit, spent time on myself, hoping we could enjoy the evening together. Do you remember that night?" I did remember. It was the day I had to let Frank go. He was a good friend and one of my assistant managers. Over the years, we became close, and I helped him progress. When he was accused of unprofessional behavior, I defended him, convinced he'd never be so reckless. But then evidence surfaced, and I had to take responsibility or risk further consequences. So as you can imagine, I wasn't in the best mood that night. But I hadn't forgotten her birthday. I made reservations at her favorite restaurant and was ready for a night out. However, all Alicia seemed to want that evening was a deeper connection. We were together that night, Alicia. I remember. She shook her head sadly. We were physically together, Greg, but I felt so alone. You seemed distant, and when I tried to get closer, you brushed me off. So I gave you space. Her voice caught, and she swallowed, steadying herself. I knew she wasn't finished, so I waited. Then, later that night, I woke up and saw you on your computer. You were looking at someone else. Her words hit with intensity, and she broke down, unable to hold back. I sat beside her, speechless. Slowly, I began to understand. Hearing her side opened my eyes. Before tonight, I saw her as unfaithful. Now I wasn't sure what to think. I understand, Alicia. I realize I took you for granted. Do you really understand, Greg? Do you know how much that hurt? How it felt to think I wasn't enough for you, even at my best? Her voice softened. After that, I decided I wouldn't ask for closeness anymore. I wanted you to want me. But you never did. So that's why you spent time with Dominic? Did he make you feel seen? She wiped her eyes and nodded slowly. Yes, Greg. He and Susie did. What? Susie and I were close friends even back in high school. There was a night years ago when we had one too many drinks and we shared some things we'd never talked about since. A decade later, I found myself at her door, feeling lost. She invited me in and we talked about everything, including the deep loneliness I'd been feeling. We spent hours just talking, trying to make sense of it all. So how did you end up with both of them? Dominic came home from work and found us in a hazy state, thoroughly intoxicated. Susie began sharing with him the challenges I'd been going through. He looked at me with a warmth that I hadn't felt in a while, commenting on how beautiful I was, how attractive he found me. Susie echoed his words. That's when the story surfaced. Our shared memories from high school. He seemed so intrigued, drawn in by the nostalgia. Then he asked us to kiss, almost as a joke, and we laughed it off but went along. It started as a light-hearted moment, but it became something deeper. I eventually pulled back, realizing he was watching us closely. He leaned in toward me, and I didn't resist. Things felt more intense than they had in years. How many times did you meet up with them like that? She looked away, her voice barely a whisper as she answered, Twice. That hurt more than I could have anticipated. The drunken encounter was already difficult enough to process, but finding out it wasn't a one-time mistake cut even deeper. So, at the party, in the kitchen, what were you and Dominic really talking about? Her eyes darkened with a mix of anger and regret. He was out of control. He kept commenting on my costume and tried to persuade me to join him and Susie that night, for old time's sake. He made an awkward joke that was definitely too personal. I was nervous that someone might hear us, so I was trying to keep things calm without making a scene. I told him it wasn't right and that we shouldn't do this anymore. Then he got a bit too forward, and that's when you walked in. Yeah, I reacted harshly. Isn't that what you said to me? She bit her lip, shaking her head. I wasn't being fair, Greg. Having Dominic act that way just reminded me of how distant things felt between us, and I took it out on you. Did you actually consider going to his place later? She looked directly at me, her expression softening. Number. In fact, I was hoping that night would be different, that you'd see me again, like you once did. I picked the Catwoman costume because I knew you liked that character. I could tell you noticed, that you were looking at me the way you used to. I almost didn't even go to the party because I wanted to spend time with you. I wish I'd trusted my instincts. Then Dominic just complicated everything. Things wouldn't have spiraled like this if you had just told me how you felt, Alicia. She shook her head again, her expression filled with regret. I know, Greg. I wish I had the right words then. I wish I'd seen things more clearly. We both made mistakes, I guess. She turned to me, her eyes full of hope. So, what do we do now, Greg? I don't want to lose you. I love you deeply, and I'll do anything to make things right. My mind was spinning. Could I move forward from this? Could I forgive her, knowing that I too was responsible for the distance between us? I don't know, Alicia. There's so much we'd have to rebuild to even begin healing. The spark of hope in her eyes grew. She wiped her tears and reached for my arm. Honey, I'll do anything to show you how much I love you. Just please give me a chance. As I looked into her eyes, hope reflected back at me. I began to feel it too. Healing each other might be possible, though it would take time. If we both put in enough effort, there was a chance. All right, Alicia. But there are a few conditions. First, we need to go to counseling. It's essential. We have a lot to work through and need to learn how to communicate better. She kissed my cheek and hugged me tightly. Yes, sweetheart. Whatever you say. Secondly, you have to end your friendship with Susie. That's when I saw the light fade from her eyes, and I felt a similar dimming in my heart. What did you say? I said you need to stop being friends with Susie. Greg, why would you ask me that? I leaned back, astonished. Are you serious, Alicia? You cheated on me with her and her husband. What did you expect me to do? Just trust it wouldn't happen again? Every time you're with her or even talking to her, don't you see what I'd be thinking and feeling? How can I heal if that wound keeps getting reopened? She pulled away as if I'd struck her, tears welling up anew. Seconds passed as we stared at each other. You want me to choose between my best friend and my husband? I can't do that, Greg. Please don't make me. The pain that hit me then is indescribable. Strangely, it was even worse than when I caught her cheating. This time, there was no anger to mask it. It felt like my heart was being crushed under a weight too heavy to bear. The realization that she couldn't choose me over her best friend was devastating. An all-consuming catastrophe. Dominic faded into the background. I couldn't care less about him now. He was the least of my worries. Greg, please don't. Make your choice, Alicia. Richard narrating. I wish I could tell you all that Alicia chose her husband over her friend. I wish I could share a romantic tale where they ride off into the sunset together. I wish. Alicia couldn't break her bond with Susie. Their connection was apparently too strong. It matched her love for Greg to the point where she wasn't willing to give it up, even at the expense of her marriage. It's sad. They divorced a little less than a year later. It took that long because Alicia did everything she could to stop it, even to the point of humbling herself. I never thought someone as proud as her would do it, but she showed up at his job and begged him not to leave her, in front of everyone. It was a heart-wrenching plea that made everyone who saw it uncomfortable. Even I secretly hoped he'd give her another chance. But Greg couldn't see a way back together as long as she refused to end her friendship. He felt he shouldn't have to share his place in her heart. In essence, he was right. No spouse should have to share. Now, a year later, the wounds are still deep. There was no winner here. They both cope as best they can for the kids. They try not to speak ill of each other in front of their little ones. However, I've spent many nights being a shoulder for my friend to lean on. One good thing did happen, though. This Halloween, he brought a date to my party. She wasn't dressed as Catwoman. She might be a rebound and not the next great one, but finding a rebound is still a step forward. In real life, people don't just get over the loss of love instantly. It's a step-by-step process. The heart heals slowly, not all at once. Alicia, Dominic, and Susie didn't show up to the party. They've stopped hanging out with the rest of us. Susie still supports her friend and blames Greg for being unfair and trying to force Alicia to make an impossible choice. In my opinion, if that choice was impossible, then Alicia wasn't as committed to the marriage as a wife should be. She said she was willing to do anything. It's funny how people throw around words like that, do anything. But what they really mean is they'll do anything that's comfortable. I'm sure she was willing to be affectionate or play the loving housewife, the things she already wanted to do. But when anything required her to sacrifice something significant, her marriage wasn't worth it to her. In my opinion, he's better off without her.